Good day, everybody. If you have joined the Cavin Balaster Rebound Community sponsored by Dr. Brody Miller, uh, we have seen him in classes on Saturday mornings at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. So that's 10 a.m. Pacific Time, Saturdays, 11 a.m. Mountain Time, Saturdays, 12 noon Central Time, Saturdays, and 1 o'clock p.m., which is 13 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard. So he's discussing a lot of information that some of it is in this book and some of it is not. He puts supplemental information into his words on those days. Dr. Brody Miller has a different book called Brain Rescue, which also has to do with what to do when you have, sorry, when you have injured your brain. Brain Rescue is a blueprint, a 90-day blueprint to reclaim your memory after a brain injury or concussion. And How to Feed a Brain is uh, by Cavino Balaster, and it is nutrition for optimal brain function and repair. So they're both about repair and reclaiming memory and maintaining good brain health. Chapter 13 is on page 109. I'm just going to read probably about a third of it because it's a nice long chapter. Gastric feeding guidelines and tips. Dr. Brody and Cavino Balaster work on this content together in the Rebound community on WhatsApp. And it is a membership. Go look at Instagram, Dr. Brody Miller, DrBrodyMiller, and you will find everything you need to find there. He talks about it, especially on Fridays at Eastern Seaboard Time, 4 p.m. Okay, but when we eat, says Cavino Balaster, when we eat, the first phase of digestion occurs in the mouth, where we chew our food and mix it with saliva. This chewed food then needs to be swallowed into the stomach and not inhaled into the lungs. After a brain injury or other neurological condition, swallowing often becomes a problem, which can pose a very dangerous situation. Feed 32 times or how many? That I would have to ask the author, and he would be able to tell you that. I'm reading the book. Oh, chew 32 times or how many? I think they agree with that. I think something like that, 30, 35. I think he said that before, but don't quote me exactly. If the pharynx or swallowing mechanism is not working effectively, food may enter the lungs, which could lead to life-threatening infections like pneumonia. A gastric feed, also known as tube feed, is a liquid diet that is fed through a tube which bypasses the pharynx and allows for liquid nutrition to be fed into the esophagus or directly into the stomach. This is where the next phase of digestion begins. This tube is known as a gastric tube. And the author says, I call him Cavino because that's his nickname, but he's really Cavin Balaster. He says, my gastric feed experience. After I woke from a coma, my swallowing mechanism, by the way, he and Dr. Brody have said in their workshops, if you have trouble swallowing in our real life, you go like this, chin to chest. And the chin to the chest helps you be able to swallow if you're having a problem swallowing something. That's just trivia that I know. Okay, my gastric feed experience. After I woke from a coma, my swallowing mechanism was not working effectively, and I had contracted both pneumonia and an MRSA infection as a result. I was only permitted to eat a pureed diet by mouth. At this time, the first real food that I could enjoy orally was soup that my mom would pick up from a cafe and puree in a blender. Unfortunately, my swallowing difficulties got worse, and I continued to aspirate my food, breathe it. To bypass the possibility of me aspirating and potentially contracting another life threatening infection, a gastric tube was placed. This is a very common procedure after a TBI. I was then being fed through a gastric tube where I received the hospital processed liquid formula that is typically fed to patients. Surprisingly, these processed liquid formulas contain many ingredients that have been shown to contribute to inflammation and or neurodegeneration. Ingredients like corn syrup, canola oil, soy protein isolate, etc. He's got an exclamation point on this. Check the ingredients list of what is being fed to you or your loved one. I think you may be surprised just as I was. And this is after he came out of the coma. These ingredients are similar to those found in a candy bar, but this is not like having one candy bar every now and then. This is breakfast, lunch, and dinner for months or even years for some patients. This kind of processed liquid formula is typically fed to patients who are not eating conventionally, both in the hospital setting and in hospice. So, in effect, some people are essentially being fed fortified corn syrup every day as their primary source of nutrition. I was one of those people. I believe these formulas disregard the patient's overall health and well being. In my opinion, it is almost criminal that they are routinely fed to patients. I agree, I agree, I agree. This is why a major objective of the book is to influence a positive change in hospital nutrition, especially in gastric feeds. I believe that through patient education, empowerment, and demand, we can create that change. Nutrition is where we derive many of the building blocks needed to rebuild and repair the brain and body. So, we want to supply the best nutrition that we can, especially after an injury or throughout a disease process. Tube feeding omega 3s. Our primary goal is to change the feed of to some excuse me. Our primary goal is to change the feed to something of much higher quality, which we will outline in the following pages. But in conjunction with that, and possibly more importantly, there is another step that can be taken to improve brain health immensely. Research shows us numerous cases that establish high quality omega 3s, capital O, as being especially therapeutic after a brain injury. As we talk about in the quote DHA use in treating TBI section end quote of this book, high dose fish oils, especially those high in both EPA and DHA, have been shown to powerfully support TBI recovery and neuroprotection. TBI stands for traumatic brain injury. High quality omega 3s may be the most important supplementation we can take after a brain injury, especially if you or your loved one is receiving a conventional gastric feed formula. I'm going to mention that in Taiwan, where I was born, my mother purposely ate lots of omega-3 fishes and things like that, because the Chinese believe in fish helping the brain. And I think they're right. I was born with a big head. I don't know. Maybe they fed me too much. LOL. Okay, back to the author. Many people have been successful in requesting that doctors allow supplementation of high quality fish oils in the gastric tube, even if efforts to allow a blenderized tube feed, as described below, were not approved by the hospital or doctors. Smash like button, yes. If real food, yes, please do smash the like button on this video. Please subscribe. Look for me on Substack. I'm Yin Yang 31 there. If real food gastric feeds are not approved, fish oil supplements, oh, no, I have had traumatic brain injuries that got me interested in this. And this gentleman, the author, is one of two authors that both were in comas after their traumatic brain injuries. They both each went into a lot of research. Dr. Brody went and got a PhD in brain research, and Cavino Balaster got a lot of research done into this book. So what I'm reading to you is about gastric feed, the chapter 13 from page 109. I can only read about a third of the chapter today because it's a fairly long chapter. If real food gastric feeds are not approved, fish oil supplementation alone can make a huge difference in recovery from a brain injury or other neurological condition. You can use the letter to clinicians further below to make the request to your doctor to allow such supplementation. By the way, I am not a doctor, and neither is Cavino Ballister, but he does have on hands. He does have nutrition. He is now a nutritionist. He is now a nutritionist. He just got that, and you would be able to ask the author. Go look on Instagram, like I mentioned earlier, for Dr. Brody Miller, and you'll get together with the group that way. You can, there's a membership fee. You can use the letter to clinicians further below to make the request to your doctor to allow such supplementation. You have a right to have such requests respected by the healthcare team, but remember to always strive to work collaboratively. Be polite. My passion, that's what I say, but hey. My passion, says the author, for helping to get your loved one high quality nutrition while in or out of the hospital is immense. So please don't hesitate to reach out for support. The author offers one-on-one consultations at feedabrain.com/consult. And we are creating courses and other resources at feedabrain.com educate/education. He's doing that. Now, here's the topic: blenderized tube feeds. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I want to mention something else. Actually, I blenderized some food for my mother, not ever having read this book, but I blenderized a lot of her favorite foods together, and I was able to feed them to her directly. And so you can, even if you don't want to use it in a gastric tube, I would recommend asking the author about what he recommends in terms of blenderizing, food that you can feed directly to the mouth. But these are about gastric tube feedings, okay? Blenderized tube feeds. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, he says, I was still receiving nutrition through a gastric tube, but I no longer had to ingest that horrible processed stuff. My mother began to make pureed soups again to put through my gastric tube by using a large syringe and a blender. This is known as a blenderized tube feed, a real food puree administered through a gastric tube. I saw a difference in my energy levels and in my overall recovery once I was being fed a real food diet instead of the processed liquid formula. In writing this section of the book, he consulted with Laura Schoenfeld, MPH, RD, a registered dietitian with a master's in public health nutrition, MPH, who has a strong background in functional medicine. For Laura's master's thesis in 2013, she published a paper entitled The Use of Blenderized Tube Feeding in Pediatric Patients, Evidence and Guidelines for Dietetic Practice. He also consulted with Catherine Hayes, CCC-SLP, Katie Haldeman, RN, the paleo nurse, that's her nickname, I guess, and Larry Lampel, Lampel, and Lampel, MSRD-CDE, a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator with a master's degree in nutritional science. In December of 2014, Practical Gastroenterology published an article titled Blenderized Tube Feeding Suggested Guidelines to Clinicians. The PDF of this and Laura's master's thesis can be found at feedabrain.com/gastric, and you can print them out to share with your medical team. The Blenderized Tube Feeding Suggested Guidelines to Clinicians article mentioned above states, quote, the best candidate is a patient and or caregiver who made the decision to, quote, try, end quote, this feeding option and is willing to commit their time and effort for instruction and preparation of BTF, Blenderized Tube Feed, end quote. The article above explains how a supporter who is willing to commit the time can work with those who are on the patient's healthcare team, i.e., nurses, dietitians, and SLPs, to feed a patient in this manner. Soon after an injury is a vulnerable period in which nutrition is vitally important. This importance is unfortunately often overlooked. Okay, I'm going to continue on with this chapter next week. We've read up to this point here. Do I have a pencil? I have a pencil somewhere. Oh, okay, I'll find it. And here is a this is a handout from the Walls Protocol by Terry Walls and Eve Adamson, copyright 2014 by Dr. Terry Walls, LLC, used by permission of Avery, an imprint of Penguin Publishing Group, a division of Penguin Random Random Health, Random House LLC. Now, I have permission from the author to read this book, and he had permission to look at all these things on his charts. And if you go to feedabrain.com, he has so many um, uh, / sections there. I've already actually read you half of this chapter, so we may only have to do it one more time. Um, in the handout on the next page, he has adapted the information in these articles to the Feed a Brain guidelines. After determining whether blenderized tube feeding is appropriate, you can use this handout to deliver foods to this guide's specifications for patients who are unable to eat conventionally. You can also purchase a Feed a Brain approved, excuse me, you can also purchase Feed a Brain approved feeds, capital F, capital E, and meal replacement shakes that can be fed through a gastric tube. These feeds are not as beneficial as the blenderized tube feeds outlined, but they're certainly easier to implement and are still much more beneficial than the standard hospital feed. Okay, so make sure you visit feedabrain.com, have a look at that, and we will continue with this next week uh, in this chapter, chapter 13. Okay, I hope I see you then. And yes, I have had a traumatic brain injury. I have had 17 traumatic brain injuries, none of which led me into comas. I have had a lot of different experiences with the injuries, mostly negative. I've never had a positive experience with a traumatic brain injury, except for maybe getting people to feel sorry for me, which was not a good thing at all. So that's still not positive. Anyway, if you've ever been conked in the head and or you've suffered from malnutrition or just undernourished your brain, this is a really good book to read. So he's got it on look at feedabrain.com to find out the prices on it. I think I paid about how much did I pay for this one? I can't remember. It probably wasn't more than 25 or 15 or something like that. Can't remember. But this is like optimizing your brain function, okay? So You got this one. And yesterday, I would have read this if I hadn't done a special that got really bonked on the electrical feed because I wound up with no internet yesterday. So, anyway, that's where I am with all of these programs. I hope I see you again tomorrow. Tomorrow I will be on a different subject. Okay, every day of the week we have a different subject. And if you go to my Facebook page, you will see the schedule. Alrighty, I'll talk to you again later. Okay, Old Kinderhook. That's the nickname of the man that we get okay from. Okay, Old Kinderhook.